Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now if you've ever wondered what life is like in Tucson, this is the video for you. Today I'm going to go over 5 pros and 5 cons of living in Tucson. But first, before we get started, please like and subscribe so that you can get updates about our future videos that come out that are just like this one. Alright, let's get started with the pros. So our first pro is the weather. Now winters here are absolutely beautiful. From about mid-October to mid-May, temperatures are lovely. A good chunk of this time, our average daily highs will be in the 60s or the 70s. And even if they get into the 80s, it's not too bad because it's a dry heat here. And I know, this is the butt of pretty much every joke.
You're kidding me, right?
But it's true and it makes a difference. So because of that dry heat, if you have a little bit of a breeze or you can find some shade rather than being in the direct sunlight, it is so much more comfortable here. And an 80-degree temperature here feels a lot better than it does throughout a lot of the rest of the US. So keep that in mind when people make but it's a dry heat joke.
It's a dry heat.
Now, along with the better weather, we also have fewer major natural disasters that a lot of the rest of the US sees. So we're not going to have major hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, tsunamis, things like that. Arizona does get some earthquakes, but they're typically concentrated more in northern Arizona than here in southern Arizona. And we don't anticipate having a big earthquake like the big one.
The big one?
That the Pacific Northwest talks about. That's just not in the cards for this area. The biggest natural disaster weather type issues that we have are heat related and flooding related, which I will get to later in this video. Benefit number 2, all of the outdoor activities. Now with this beautiful weather that we have for so much of the year, Tucson is a hub for outdoor activities. Anything from hiking, biking, running, to golf or horseback riding. If there's an outdoor activity, you can probably find people doing it here. Now along with this, we also have a number of triathletes and other endurance athletes that will actually come here and train, particularly in the winters. Part of this is because of that nice weather. But we also have a lot of mountain ranges and hills in the area, and so they can do some really good elevation training here. And so that combination makes for a popular training destination. And then Tucson also being further south than much of the rest of the continental US means that our variation between daylight hours and nighttime hours is less. And so compared to, say, the Northwest, in the winter, our sun comes up earlier and the sun goes down later. And so you have nice weather stacked on top of more daylight hours to work with in the winter. And it's just a really nice place to be and to enjoy all those outdoor activities that you can do here. Pro number 3, Tucson is a foodie town. So Tucson was actually the first city in the US to be named a UNESCO City of Gastronomy, and it's currently one of only 2, the other being San Antonio. Tucson received this distinction because of the region's rich agricultural heritage, thriving food traditions, and culinary distinctiveness. So Tucson's agricultural heritage actually extends back over 4,000 years, and Tucson is the longest known continuously cultivated area in North America. So that's a pretty cool fun fact that you can share with your friends. The Tucson City Council also named an area of South Tucson as the 23 best miles of Mexican food in the country. And this is due in part to the fact that there's such a high concentration of Mexican restaurants within this 23 square mile radius. Now, individual restaurants are also receiving attention and recognition and awards here in Tucson. So just earlier this year, Tumerico received the top honor of Yelp's 100 Places to Try in 2024 for all across the country. And then we've also had a number of James Beard Award-winning restaurants here. The most recent was in 2022 when the owner of Barrio Bread, Don Guerra, won the award. But we regularly have semifinalists and finalists in various categories of the James Beard Award. So that's pretty cool for the city. But it's not just Mexican food that's good here. We have all different types of cuisines here. And there's also a growing brew and wine culture here. So if you're into those sorts of things, Tucson's not a bad place to be either. The 4th benefit on our list, the cost of living. Now, cost of living now is pretty close to being on par with the national average. There was a time not too many years ago when Tucson was well below the national average on cost of living, but during the COVID years and the movement that happened then, we have had a lot of folks come from high income areas, California, the Northwest, Chicago, Denver, those sorts of places. And so our cost of living has gone up quite a bit over the last few years. But it is still about on par with the national average. And again, if you're coming from the western states, say, you're definitely going to see your money go further here. So let's take a few examples of this, starting with Seattle. If your annual salary in Seattle is $75,000, you don't even need to make $52,000 here to have your standard of living be the same. And if you notice, housing in Tucson is half what it is in Seattle. That's a big difference. And your overall cost of living is nearly a third less. Let's take another one, San Jose. A lot of folks coming from the California area, San Jose being one of those. Same $75,000 of income, you need about $52,000 here. And here the housing costs are even more pronounced. So over 56% lower if you move to Tucson. You can get a lot more house here than if you are living in California or a place like that. And that's something that Scott noticed when he moved here. As soon as he moved here, he commented he felt at that time that he could get a third more house here than he could in the Portland, Oregon area. And he also commented that gas prices were cheaper, groceries were cheaper, and so he just felt like I'm in the money. His money went so much further living in Tucson than it did living in the Northwest. Now, something that we also hear a lot is that people are considering moving to Arizona, but they don't know if they want to go to Phoenix or Tucson, and they're trying to compare the two. So we also did a comparison between these, and while the cost of living is pretty comparable between the two, you'll notice that again, housing is almost 15% less in Tucson. And a big part of this is because during COVID, Phoenix housing prices went up like crazy, a lot more than we did. They have come down some, but just not enough to make up for how much they went up during those few years. And so you can get, again, more house for your money in Tucson than in Phoenix. And it's a lot cooler here. Typically, you can be in the 5 to 8 degrees cooler in Tucson than in Phoenix. So we might be a little partial.
Strictly impartial.
But we like Tucson a lot better than Phoenix. All right, and the last benefit on the list today, growing industries. So many of Tucson's jobs are in sectors like healthcare, education, government, technology, hospitality, which makes sense when you look at the population here. We have a large university here, and then we also have a lot of seasonal visitors, seasonal residents, retirees, and so these sectors make sense for who lives here. Now, some of the larger employers include U of A with almost 16,000 employees. Raytheon has another 12,000 plus employees. And if you're in the tech or the defense industry and thinking about moving here, we've found that Raytheon will oftentimes have some pretty significant sign-on bonuses. So if you're looking for a job, that might be a place to look. Other large employers here include Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. We have a large military presence here in Tucson. And then some of the others that you would expect for a large city, like the state of Arizona, the school systems, those sorts of things are large employers for us. Now, we also have a number of companies that are opening up factories or warehouses in the area. So here are just a few that are coming up. The American Battery Factory is slated to open a facility in late 2024 and is expected to bring hundreds of jobs with that opening. Microstar Logistics has a facility that is expected to open later in the year as well. Amazon has a distribution center that has been completed but hasn't officially opened up yet. So once that happens, we're expecting more jobs there. And then there are some agricultural distribution centers in Marana. Now, Marana's northwest of Tucson proper, one of the suburbs more or less of Tucson, and they're being completed as we speak. And so once those open, again, probably later this year, there will be more jobs at those distribution centers as well. Now, like much of the country right now, Tucson is experiencing low unemployment rates. We're in the mid to upper 3% range. All right, now it's time for the cons on the list. And you knew this was going to be the top one. It's the weather. While the winters are lovely, there's no denying that the summers are hot.
Yes, it's hot. It's hot, right? It's hot.
In June and July, the average daily highs are over 100 degrees. And if we get a monsoon, a real good monsoon with rain coming through, it can actually make the summers a lot better and a lot more bearable. The years where we don't have a monsoon, 2020, 2023, neither of those were great years for monsoon activity. Those are actually the worst summers for us. And you say, you made a joke about it being dry heat.
It's a dry heat.
Isn't that humid? It is. The difference is you can go from a 105-degree day in the middle of the summer to a 75-degree day in a matter of minutes when the rain comes through. It's that drastic of a change. And so once summer comes, we want the humidity because we want that rain that typically comes with it.
It's hot. It's humid.
It just makes such a difference on making the summers more bearable. We found talking to people and our clients who come here, some will come for a week or 2 or 3 in the summer before they move, just to try to test it out, see, can I actually live in Tucson in the summers in this heat?
Oh. Yeah, just try it out.
And they think, yeah, we can. They go back home, they end up buying here, and then they live through a full summer here. And that is when they really realize how long and hot some of the summers can be, particularly when we don't have a lot of monsoon activity. It just sort of starts to wear on you. The longer the summer goes without rain, without the cooler temperatures, it gets old. And so you'll find a lot of people here, if they're able to, they'll take a week, a couple weeks, even as much as like a month off and go travel somewhere north that's cooler, temperatures in the 80s. And just having that break in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the heat, makes getting through a summer much, much better here. So if you do move here and are able to leave for even a little bit of the summer, it will make getting through the whole summer a lot more bearable. And then you get the nice fall and the nice winter after that. Now, with the monsoons, that can mean flooding. This is typically in the washes, but this can extend to the roadways as well. And so there's a saying here, turn around, don't drown. If you're here in the summers and watch the news or listen to the radio, you will hear this saying all the time, but it's true. You really can't always tell how deep the water is in areas, and often where roadways cross washes, there will be a dip right before you get there, and so you think that it might not be that deep, but it's deeper than you realize. And there are people every year that have to get rescued because they tried to drive through an area that they couldn't drive through. So just be careful. When it comes to your house, there are homes that get built in flood zones. Now, if you're buying one of these homes and you're getting a mortgage, your lender is going to require that you buy additional flood insurance along with your homeowner's insurance policy to help protect you in case you were to get flooded. But if you're buying cash, buying outright, there's no requirement that you get flood insurance, but we strongly, strongly encourage you to do this anyway.
You are strongly encouraged.
Because your regular homeowner's insurance policy will not protect you if your home is flooded during the monsoon. So just keep that in mind as another way to protect yourself. That's pretty much our big natural disaster that we have here. So disadvantage number 2 is the city layout. Now, we love them, but those darn mountains get in the way. So as Tucson has grown, it has gone up and around some of the mountain ranges. Tucson's surrounded by 5 different mountain ranges, so there's only so much room to work with. And so, for instance, Tucson proper is south of the Catalina Mountains, the biggest mountain range here, but Oro Valley is to the west of it. So if you're trying to drive, say, from Oro Valley to northeast Tucson, you can't just go straight there. You have to go south to get around the tip of the Catalinas and then go east to get to northeast Tucson. So it just makes driving a little bit more inconvenient. The major route through town is I-10, and that runs from the northwest side to the southeast side. So if you're driving in that direction and have to drive on I-10 for commutes, it's really not too bad. Again, especially if you're coming from a place like LA where you're used to sitting in traffic for hours a day, you're not going to find that here. We don't have traffic like that in Tucson. But if you're traveling, say, from West Tucson to East Tucson or Northeast Tucson, or if you're traveling from North Tucson to South Tucson, you're pretty much just driving surface streets and dodging mountains. There's no real good way of getting to across the town besides I-10 because we just haven't had any other highways or freeways through the city that have been built. Tucson has maintained this sort of attitude of being a little town, even though the Tucson metro population is now over 1 million people. And so with that, we just haven't had the driving infrastructure built that we maybe would have liked. And so just be aware that drive times across the city could be 45 minutes, 60 minutes, even though it feels like it's a small town and shouldn't take that long to get around. Con number 3, it's the critters. Tucson and southern Arizona are home to various snakes, including rattlesnakes, also things like pack rats, scorpions, javelina, coyotes. And so if you're really not a bug person, not a critter person, Tucson might not be the place for you. That being said, a lot of people will do quarterly spraying or semi-annual spraying, and that really helps cut down on things like scorpions and other creepy crawlies that you'll find around your home. Now, if snakes are what you're concerned about, there's a good chance that someone in your neighborhood will be able to help remove them if you find one on your property. They might be an amateur snake wrangler, but they can probably get the job done. And if nothing else, the fire department will actually come take care of snakes and remove them for you if you call them. So that's a benefit. But we also really encourage people when they move here to get to know their snakes, because actually some snakes are beneficial. So for instance, king snakes will not only take care of rodents that you might have around your property, but they will also go after rattlesnakes. And so you might not want to remove a king snake from your property because that might be beneficial to you. Just keep an eye out for them. Most of the bites with snakes happen because either people were messing with them, doing something that they shouldn't have been doing.
All the snakes alone.
Or they step on them. Both Scott and I have stories of stepping or almost stepping on snakes. So you just have to keep an eye out, watch for them, especially if you're enjoying all of our outdoor activities. Watch where you're stepping before you do so, and don't mess with them if you come across them. And you should be fairly safe on the snake front. Now, pack rats and other rodents are a bit of a nuisance here as well.
It's a pack rat. He steals stuff and hides it in his hole.
They can go into roofs and attics, and they can also go into your vehicle's engines and eat through engines, basically. And so to help mitigate that, try to limb up any vegetation that's on the ground or that's low that they could shelter in. They like hiding under vegetation areas. And then again, consider keeping those beneficial snakes like the king snakes around that will help reduce the number of unwanted critters and rodents in your area. And then when it comes to the javelinas, the coyotes, we'll occasionally see bobcats, critters like that. Generally, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. One word of warning, though, is that if you have small pets, like small dogs or cats, those are the ones that these critters will typically go after. And so just be aware of that if you're out walking a dog on a leash. Give them extra space. And then also the mamas with babies, like mama javelinas, can be actually quite aggressive if they feel their babies and them are being threatened. And so again, give them a wide berth. Don't mess with the wildlife, and it typically won't mess with you either. Con number 4 is schools, and this really applies to not just Tucson but all of Arizona. But we feel like it's a reason that a lot of young families end up leaving this area. So the Arizona school system was recently ranked 48th in the US, which is not a great stat. But because of the low investment in schools, it also means that we have lower property taxes than a lot of other states. And so we find that some retirees like that, their kids aren't in school anymore, it doesn't affect them, but they can pay less in property taxes. And so that is the trade-off that we have for not as great of a public school system. Now, because the public school system isn't as good, a lot of families will send their kids to private schools or charter schools, and the state helps families to do this. So there is an Arizona tuition tax credit that, depending on how you file, there's a certain amount that you can get in a credit on your taxes if your kids are going to a charter school. And then Arizona students can also receive about $7,000 per year to attend private, charter, or alternative schools of their choice if they would like to do that rather than going to a public school. So there are some options for families if they are concerned about the quality of public schools in Arizona. And then our last negative for the Tucson area is air travel. Now, before I get into this, I want to say that we actually love the Tucson airport. And if we have the choice between flying out of Tucson or out of Phoenix Sky Harbor, we will almost always pick Tucson. It's convenient, it's quick, security lines typically aren't that long. Long-term economy parking is really inexpensive. We're talking like $5 a day to park there. It's just way more convenient than going up to Phoenix. But because it's a smaller airport, it means that we don't have as many non-stop flights to other destinations as a place like Sky Harbor would. So if you're flying to one of the airline's major hubs, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Salt Lake, Denver, Chicago, Dallas, those types of places, you can get nonstop flights pretty easily. They're not too expensive. That's doable. But if you're going beyond these places, then there's a good chance that you're going to have to make at least one stop in your flying, and that can be a little less convenient. Now for us, because we still have family up in the Northwest, we fly up there a couple times a year typically. Often it's into Portland. Alaska has one flight a day that is nonstop between Tucson and Portland, but it is a seasonal only flight. And so for part of the year, we can fly really easily and really conveniently from Tucson to Portland, but for the other part of the year, we can't. So we feel like that's a disadvantage compared to if you're up in a Phoenix area or some city like that that has a bigger population, a bigger airport, and more convenient travel options. And with that, thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned a little bit more about the Tucson area. If you think you would like to buy here, or if you already live here and have a home to sell, please reach out to us. You can find our email in the description below. We would love to work with you. If you have any comments or questions or other things you'd like to learn about the Tucson area, leave a comment for us and you might find a video in the future about that. And then also like and subscribe so that you do get notified when we make more videos like this. Well, until next time, thanks for watching.